I think it's important, first of all, when people talk about loss, like loss is loss is loss. It looks different for different people, but there's no quantifying or comparing it. Even people who have lost, that I know that have lost a child or just lost a dream they had, they're oftentimes, if they hear my story, they will easily say, oh, I know it's not necessarily what you went through. And that's my default. I can't imagine losing a child tragically suddenly. I feel like I was eased into it and I cannot wrap my mind around it. But it's people hurting and people caring for people.
This is the Turn Your Life Around podcast, and I'm the 180 lady. I've been helping people turn their lives around since 2007 as the founder and CEO of a large mental health company. The purpose of this podcast is to have meaningful conversations with old friends and new friends, everyday people just like you and me, about how they turn their lives around. We'll discuss all things mental health, fitness, finances, relationships, parenting, spirituality, you name it. My hope is that you can take something away that will encourage you today. I'm your host, Sarah Coates. Are you ready to turn your life around? Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Miss Patience Leino. Patience is a longtime friend. As you know, we're having conversations with old friends and new friends. And although Patience isn't old in number, she's a longtime friend of mine. And so I'm really excited to have Patience share her story, her turning life around moments with you. But first, I want to go ahead and introduce her. Patience is a national speaker, writer, and advisor in pediatric healthcare. She's the program manager of the American Board of Pediatrics Foundation. She's involved in national efforts to improve pediatric medical education, assessment, and practice. Also initiatives in behavioral mental health and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And she also helps with building partnerships between healthcare providers and patients and families to advance the health of all children. Patience is also a teacher for the UNC's School of Medicine and UNC's Institute of Healthcare Quality Improvement. She's also a mom of two teenagers, and she serves as a worship leader at Seven Marks Church and volunteers with lots of local nonprofits. So excited to have you.
It's so good to see you, Sarah.
We haven't caught up in a long time.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
So we're going to catch up over a podcast.
Okay. I love it.
But welcome. I'm so glad you're here. This is the Turning Life Around podcast. And so I love to talk with people all over our community who have turned their lives around. I think it's, very powerful for everyday people like yourself and myself just to share our stories with others. And what a cool platform to do it. So thanks for being willing.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you so much.
If you will, can you just share a little bit about who you are today and what you're doing?
Yeah. So I work in pediatrics. I work in mostly areas affecting kind of national aspects through the American Board of Pediatrics, where if you are a board certified pediatric physician or one of 15 subspecialties, you get board certified through ABP, where I work and maintain that. And my role there is program manager of their foundation, which is a 501c3 organization that kind of partners with the main ABP to fund innovation, research, collaborations type things. So I oversee just the process of that with the grants, helping make sure things come in and equipping people who are making the decisions of what aligns with the mission and the vision to just help us advance the health of all children everywhere. And then I do a lot of work with building partnerships between the patients and families and physicians, kind of that public engagement where so those who are on the receiving end of healthcare are just as much involved in the process of giving it. Like a lot of times say, you never wake up hoping to need healthcare. A lot of people dream of providing it or making things better.
Yeah.
But most of the times, especially in pediatrics, parents plan for health. They plan for wellness. But when you're thrown in a situation, when you're dependent on that care, that voice, that perspective needs to help inform the process of training and equipping and standards. So I do that and some work with UNC, which I'll share a bit how I got involved with them. Just teaching from that parent-family life experience type thing. Yeah, that's what I do in my day job.
Your day job.
Yeah, I love it.
And then you're raising teenagers, which
I am middle schoolers. Yes, it is. It keeps me on my toes. I love my children so much. They teach me all the time, and it's very humbling and rewarding and not dull. We'll say that.
Not dull.
Yeah, they're just growing up so fast. And
I know.
A lot of times I'll see things my children are doing. I'll come home and I'm like, hey, when I was this age, did I? She's like, I mean, you did not do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, Mom, I had no idea. Teach me how you got through it. So I feel like my whole life is in a state of learning and trying to just keep moving forward and figure out more things I don't know and trying to learn them to hopefully make things better.
I saw this thing the other day on some social media outlet. It was probably Facebook. But anyways, it was like basically saying, that you can say to your oldest child, like, let's see, how did it go? Something about, I've never been a parent before. Like, show me some grace because I've never been a parent. For me, I'm like, I've never been a parent to two teenagers before, and so cut me a little slack here. It's the first time I'm doing
my
this.
best. Yeah.
Learning as we go.
Yeah.
So if you will you share a little bit about how you got into the field that you're working in now? You've got a big full circle story that I would, I think it would be really impactful for the listeners to hear.
I'd love to. Yeah. Thank you. You've actually been along the way with that journey since the beginning. So in 2005, I got married and relocated to North Carolina. Grew up in Maryland, so was adjusting to married life, the culture of the South, and
sweet tea,
everything that goes along with that. So, newlywed, kind of starry-eyed, having all these aspirations of what married life was going to be. Me and my husband had met doing ministry in college. We were now doing full-time ministry here. And had this idea of the 5-year plan. We're going to wait 5 years. We are going to do the adulting thing, do the married thing, and then we'll start talking about a family. And that plan lasted about 9 months, as it does. And so we started shifting dreams and plans from, us just being two adults learning to be married to now we're preparing for a child. So naturally you think of planning a nursery, dreams of what this will look like with sports and recitals and traveling and trips and arguing about what names to pick type of thing. And it just got really exciting. And so, with a normal pregnancy, you go in for the 20-week ultrasound where usually people think of it as, am I having a boy or a girl ultrasound?
Oh, right.
And it's where they measure everything to make sure things are on track. And when we were in there, the tech had that look of like, some things, this is interesting. I'm going to send you here. And it's turned into 2 weeks of trying to see the right people to get the right answers because my baby, who's a boy, just really liked to not be in positions where you could see. So about 2 weeks into trying to figure out what was going on, we learned that my son was going to be born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which is one of the most complex, critical congenital heart defects. It's a lot of different things that go wrong, but in short, it is the left side of the heart, left ventricle, which pumps oxygenated blood to the body. It was severely underdeveloped, like barely there, and a bunch of other things. And so usually these kids, they used to call them blue babies before they knew what it was, but these are kids that survive. You have to have 3 open heart surgeries by the time you're 2 years old and or a heart transplant. But so we moved all our care to UNC and met all the specialists and toured all the ICUs. But from what we understood was kids with these conditions, they navigate it, but they can go on to live a really healthy life because of just all sorts of advancements and things. So we had all the appointments, all the ultrasounds. I have tons of pictures of my little boy. Kind of spoiled me before my other pregnancies. And then Isaac was born in February of 2007. It was a very difficult delivery. And they got him out, handed him to me, and he was really struggling to breathe. So a team of 10 NICU people that were in the room when it happened rushed him to the NICU. And about an hour later, a nurse came in and told us they had stabilized him, but his heart wasn't the only problem. He had a lot of other anomalies affecting his little body from like physically with his spine, his ear, hands, cleft palate, all sorts of different things that none of the ultrasounds had picked up on. And so again, it was shifting that idea of you're not just going to have a heart baby. You have a medically complex little guy. And so when he was 3 days old, open heart surgery, and it just began what ended up being 110 days in the pediatric ICU, this sweet little ginger boy with a broken heart. So with that, like the PICU became our home. That's where I lived basically 4.5 months. And the nurses and doctors, became our community that came. I remember you and Bradley coming to visit several times.
Oh my gosh. I remember one time coming up there and I think it was the first time. And I walked on that floor and I'd never been on a floor like that before ever. And just overcome with emotion.
Yeah.
And I broke down crying and you're comforting me. And I was like, this is not right. I'm here for you. And you're comforting me because I'm sobbing, like a train wreck. And I was so embarrassed. Like, oh my gosh, Sarah, pull it together.
Well, you're not supposed to see babies whose bodies don't work. You're not supposed to see little kids or big kids connected to machines. I mean, I know the first time I toured the PICU, I had that reaction. So in my mind, I was like, I know, like nobody should have to see this. No one should have to live it.
Right.
But it is what it is. But you guys, I don't think you ever knew how much it meant, of how consistent and intentional you guys were involved. So I won't belabor the point, but it really meant a lot. So anyway, we were on the PICU. Isaac ended up having 5 surgeries by the time he was 10 weeks old and needed to be fully dependent on a ventilator, a trach, feeding tube, straight into his stomach. Because the more we learned about his little body, the more we realized there was a lot more going on that we just didn't know about. And it was a scary time. We had 3 different situations where he was so sick to the point that they were having conversations of like, do we need to talk about do not resuscitate? Do we need to bring all the family in? Types of things. And somehow he was able to just make it through the night for those. So finally, when he was about 4.5 months old, we were able to bring him home from the PICU, which is just amazing. He had all the equipment in the world and we had 24-hour in-home nursing, but he was home. We were able to get him into that nursery that we had dreamed of at the beginning. Right. I mean, he had tons of equipment, but it was so good to get him home. And that was just a few weeks of kind of going back and forth from the hospital to home. And then there was one time when he was about 22 weeks old, we'd been to the pediatrician to get labs and stuff. And they called us and said, he's severely dehydrated. You need to get him to the hospital so he won't start seizing. So we did get him to the hospital. He did start seizing and got him back up to the PICU to see our regular people. And they ran a bunch of tests to get him back up, but his heart oxygen levels were so much lower than what they were supposed to be. Kids with HLHS, they're usually in a certain range, but he was still much lower. And then it ended up being one of the doctors had to come in the room. It was actually the first day he ever smiled. Come in the room and tell us that his heart wasn't growing. It was becoming thick because he basically had 2 chambers doing the work of 4. And his pulmonary artery wasn't growing. So he no longer had the anatomy that would survive the next surgery or a heart transplant. Basically, there's literally nothing else we can do. And so they had tons of compassion and they said, we're going to get him as healthy as we're able with what we've got and get you guys as much time at home. But we think we have probably about a month left.
Wow.
So about 2 weeks later, he died. He died at home when I was holding him. And sweet little boy just kind of rocked our world, changed everything. But that started something in my life I couldn't have expected. It's kind of like in C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. These kids go through this wardrobe and have this whole life, this whole full experience. And one day they go back through the door. They can't go back to Narnia. They're in this environment that they came from. It all looks the same, but they're completely different. And it's like that. You return to this life without this whole experience and nothing really tangible to show for it, but you're changed. But your circumstances still look the same. And to the outside people, it looks like you're still doing the same. So anyway, it ended up being where about a year later, some of Isaac's care providers, we had stayed in touch because we'd built relationships with these people. Like one of the doctors spoke at his memorial service, just amazing. And they said, hey, would you, if you're not comfortable with this, that's fine. But would you be interested in just coming into the hospital and just sharing a little of your experience and help us see what we could change or maybe make a little bit easier for other people that come through the unit? And that just started a long journey of kind of just saying yes to the next thing that presented itself. And it started with just talking a little bit about my story and figuring out peds ICU beds, they need a sleep chair for parents, not just a recliner, but something they can sleep in. We need food and parking vouchers that you don't have to fill out paperwork, but nurses, if they perceive a family isn't being limited in coming in, they can just hand them a voucher to get a meal or to get parking. And going from there, I ended up co-founding the Children's Family Advisory Board for the hospital and writing the bylaws, did a year-long Lean Six Sigma Greenbelt project, which is a type of quality improvement methodology to standardize daily communication between providers and families to make sure like that communication is actually happening. Which ended up getting published and doing conferences and started developing curriculum with, again, the doctors and staff that had taken care of my little boy. And it all started because of this sweet little guy who came in peculiar packaging, and there were people who saw more than just a scared mom across a hospital bed. Wow. They saw someone who they could partner with. And that meant just as much as their medical knowledge in taking care of this little guy. So then fast forward to 9-ish years ago, my life had to shift again. My family changed and I had been a stay-at-home mom of 2 healthy kids. And I needed to now shift into being a single mom and provider. And I had this question of like, what am I going to do? I have been married and in full-time ministry, and now I'm going to be a divorced woman with a Bible degree in the South. This is not marketable. How do I do this? I've been taking care of children.
Right.
But what was really cool is everything that I had learned because of Isaac and the subsequent years of just different things because of those hard things becoming available. Those relationships and that experience had actually equipped me with the skill set I needed to have the job that I didn't know I would need at the time. So I ended up being able to start working for the American Board of Pediatrics, just kind of part-time with quality improvement. And I've been there, it'll be 9 years this month, actually.
Oh my goodness.
So I've been able to work with this amazing organization and great people, work with doctors that took care of my family when I was just a terrified mom that knew nothing about medicine, and work on improvement projects, building the child family health initiatives with the board, and now being in the foundation part of things for about 2 years. It's just kind of full circle. I actually, 2 weeks ago, I saw one of Isaac's physicians, who was one that spoke at the memorial service, at work. And we were just catching up and talking. I'm like, look, who would have thought, type of thing. So it really has come full circle. And it is still one of those things that when I stop and think about, I'm just really grateful and humbled because that outcome doesn't always happen.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of a snapshot
of how things turned around.
Yeah.
It's amazing to just for me to think, hearing you share the story of, how many other people's lives have been changed because of what you went through. I mean, that probably just, spreads out into multiples and multiples. And then now even the work you're doing, of course, how that is impacting many people. Yeah.
It's humbling. It's really humbling how the broken places can become the gold that glues someone's pottery back together. It is humbling, and it's something that still needs to heal me, type of thing. You know what I mean? I'm in part able to have gone on this journey because other people who've gone before did that. People who had hypoplastic left heart kids or walked a really difficult road, even if it didn't look like mine, but were willing to share their experience and their story and to pull value out and hold space for me when I wasn't okay, and then help me get back up and keep moving forward. So I'm just really grateful for my little guy. I'm so sad he had to go through so many painful things, but I wouldn't trade him for the world. He was a really special little guy.
For sure.
Proper ginger, which makes me really happy. But
Proper ginger.
yeah, he was just really, really sweet. So,
how old would he have been today?
17.
17.
Yeah.
That's wild to think how long ago. And yet I'm sure for you, it feels like just yesterday.
It's the both and, you know, it is crazy to think, to see friends with 17-year-olds.
Right.
And have my other children that are almost 13 and 14, the two. And to think like he would legally be an adult next year, kind of like with graduating high school and stuff. It's just strange. And it's one of those things when you have a very medically complex little person that you're taking care of, thinking, when I think of him aging, I am part thinking of 17 and what that looks for like an anatomical normal person. And then also what was his reality and wondering what that would look like. But it really is amazing and gives me a lot of appreciation for people who live with special needs, who live with difficulties they never would have chosen, but life has required that they bear up under the weight of it.
Yeah.
And how really strong they are. But yeah, it's crazy. It would have been 17 years. Yeah.
Do you think either one of your living children, do you ever look at them and think like, you know, would Isaac have looked like one of them over the other, that kind of thing?
Yeah, actually my daughter, she has these big, beautiful eyes. They're bright blue, and Isaac's were very similar. And my son, there's parts of his face, like his sweet little nose, and that remind me a lot of him. So it's just interesting seeing little bits where they all kind of connect together.
Yeah. If you're okay with sharing,
go for it.
what do you say to other moms, other dads who have lost young children, whether medically complex or through some other tragedy? Like what do you share with them about what got you through those really hard, dark points?
That's a good question. I think it's important, first of all, when people talk about loss, like loss is loss is loss. It looks different for different people, but there's no quantifying or comparing it. Even people who have lost, that I know that have lost a child or just lost a dream they had, oftentimes if they hear my story, they will easily say, oh, I know it's not necessarily what you went through. And that's my default. I can't imagine losing a child tragically suddenly. I feel like I was eased into it and I cannot wrap my mind around it. But it's people hurting and people caring for people. And so when I meet parents who have lost a child, or just navigating that hard diagnosis or a reality of a chronic condition, I try to say a couple of things because someone said them to me and they helped me a lot. I actually share this with med students at UNC. First, I identify like what not to say.
Yeah.
Like never say, well, at least, or I know exactly how you feel. Like everyone's experience is their own and we got to hold space for the hard. I just first say like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened. Like, let me hear about it. Just holding space to listen, I think helps. It helped me. And to be able to listen to people without requiring them, requiring the person you're listening to have to make you feel better about their story.
Right.
Like there's a difference between like what you were sharing earlier coming in and that for me being able to hopefully help other people feel okay in this hard situation, that was a help to me. But other times when you share, like if I talk about my son dying or I see someone talking about their child dying, they end up feeling like they have to diminish it so the other person can handle the weight of that. And I don't think that necessarily helps. So when I do meet those families, I try to hold that space of like, this is significant, this matters. It looks different than mine and mine will look different than yours or the next person, but it matters. It doesn't compare. And then, I don't know, I think just keep showing up for people is what it is. I find a lot of times that when there's either a hard diagnosis or especially a child death, people are so tempted to not talk about it or to show up just in the immediate when you can see the shrapnel of life still around. But it's later, oftentimes, that you need it just as much, if not more. I had a friend that told me, Wise Kathy Tellison. I think you know her. She's one of those people who had an experience and then reached out to me when I was struggling because she could connect it. And she said, a lot of people, the grief really hits 6 to 9 months later, which at the time I was like, I'm pretty sure this is as bad as it's going to get. Right. But she was right. It's after everything looks normal. It's when people, it seems like they've forgotten that your person has gone by. Elizabeth Edwards has this amazing quote. She is a woman whose family is involved in politics, and they lost a child. And I'll paraphrase it, but basically she says, whenever people don't mention a child that's lost, they think, I'm going to try to avoid bringing up something hard. I don't want to make this person sad. But the fact is, you never forget that you've lost your child. You never forget. You're never going to be caught off guard by someone asking about, like for me, how was Isaac? It's not going to rock me back into this thing. This is my reality every day.
Right.
But it's such a gift when you can say, hey, talk to me about that person, because it shows you remember, and you remember they lived and that it mattered. And that is the greatest gift. I think that helps people a lot and gives permission to others to lean in without feeling like you are adding a burden by bringing this up. I'll give you an example. So in February, when it was Isaac's 17th birthday, I want to honor him and recognize him. I don't talk about him a ton, in part because it's a sad story. I'm okay, but it can make people uncomfortable. Right. And it's not the everyday that I live in, but I wanted to do something for him and post a picture and just acknowledge that he was there. Yeah. And I worried about even what to post because he had a lot of equipment. He just was very bedazzled in medical gear and support stuff. Made a little thing. And some people remembered and reached out and said, oh yeah, thinking of you today. And I had one friend who actually, I had not met her when Isaac was alive, but she reached out to me and she's like, hey, I'm thinking of you today. Could you send me some of your favorite pictures of your son? I'd love to see him. And that meant so much. That's something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Just someone leaning into the hard and saying, I really want to bear witness to it. I don't just want to hear about it. I want to experience what I can now with this person you cared about. So I know that's a bunch of different things, but it's just showing up in ways that you can bear witness to someone's story. Right. I think that's what I would tell people around those who have lost. And then for those who are in the midst of losing it is just being able to just be honest with how hard it is. You don't have to make it nice and shiny. You don't have to find the silver linings to make everyone okay. There are some, but the more honest you can be about where you're at and the hard and let people into that. I think that's really powerful because it shows this person mattered and what you went through mattered and you don't have to be alone in it type of thing.
That's good. Yeah. You don't have to be alone.
No, I think if so many people, if we all knew how lonely each other was, we wouldn't be alone in our loneliness. There's actually profound community in loneliness, but we tend to isolate ourselves and think I'm the only one, no one's here. But just being willing to lean into that space matters. And you end up finding empathy and community and different things and valuing each other's losses, kind of.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That makes a lot of sense. Did you have a lot of therapy after your loss?
Girlfriend, yes, I did. Praise the Lord. Yes, I did have a lot of therapy. I am still doing therapy. I am very pro therapy.
Yay, let's give a hand for therapy.
Well, honestly, that's something I'm endlessly proud of you for because you just keep working so hard to making it accessible to people where they need it, when they need it, in a variety of situations. No, but therapy, oh my goodness. I wouldn't be here sitting with you if it weren't for therapy and talking through the things and EMDR and exploring underlying legit traumas that inform other traumas. Therapy is, I feel like that should just come with the diagnosis in general for anything hard. Here's this, here's your doctor, here's your therapist. This is all going to go together. That's been really helpful because grief doesn't go away. It just shifts. It takes different forms. And it can heal and mend, but it never quite goes away. There are little things that will trigger it, or surprising things that'll catch you off guard. You either think, this shouldn't be affecting me. This is what's been like a decade or more now. Like, why is this bothering me? It's like, no, because this really mattered.
Yeah, because you're human.
We're human. And grief can either make you hard or it can make you soft, and that can change. But through therapy, through like evidence-based practice with people who are legitimately trained and skilled and wise, that has been a space now over 17 years that has allowed me to kind of work through this, and probably part of why I'm able to do the work I do, because I do meet a lot of people who either lose a child or just have some type of loss and their life gets stuck there.
Yeah.
That's the only lens they can see life through. And that's not a judgment on them, but that's a hard space to continually be living in that loss. And I don't know that I wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for things like therapy and community and different things to hopefully move beyond it, not past it, because the past is never the past, but to be able to move forward in a way where you can be supportive with your story without requiring support of, how do I say it? With some of the family groups, we want people to be able to bring their story in a way that they're supportive of each other without it requiring to be a support group type of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't heal alone at all. You can't heal alone, and you can't heal with just people telling you what you want to hear. It takes that wisdom, the therapy community that's willing to speak honest truth and to hold space for your story, to be able to see someone bearing witness to your story and responding. It takes all those things, I think, to heal.
Yeah,
I still need it.
You still need it.
I still need it. In so many areas of life.
Yeah, it is fascinating how, back to what you were saying, how unfortunately some people get stuck in their trauma, their loss, their grief, and, they're unable to work through it. And I think that's maybe a natural human reaction is to withdraw and isolate and pull inward when you're going through something really hard.
Yeah.
I think that's a typical reaction, human reaction.
Yeah.
It's very hard to reach out and ask for help, I think.
Oh, it's so hard. And that's my tendency still with other areas of my life that are still hard. That's my tendency. Something I have found that was helpful to me, and I try to I don't do it perfectly, and to encourage others to do, is be helpful in how I offer help, or help to try to offer words or comfort in a way that is actually comforting to the person. Because I think a lot of times we end up offering comfort in a way that's either going to comfort us.
Oh, for sure.
Like the things people said to me at Isaac's funeral, you knew they were earnest, but we're like, why? Just don't say that. Please don't tell me you know how I feel because your dog died. I mean,
oh, brother.
Like things like that, which I have no doubt they did. They were really trying, but it's like, no, you're trying to make yourself feel better. But having people willing to kind of pull me out of the isolation, other people pull you out of the isolation by showing up in a way that they can connect with, or just being able to say, like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I'm just really sorry. That creates a safe space to like let the isolation fade away. I think something that's really helpful for people wanting to offer help to others is doing tangible bite-sized things. I know I can also be tempted to just be like, hey, let me know, is there anything I can do to help? And I give this example a lot that say you're sick. You're really sick. You've got this pile of dirty, stinky laundry. There's dirty underwear in there. There's socks. It's just piling up, but you can't do anything about it. You're super, super sick. And you're not getting better anytime soon. And someone earnestly will say like, hey, is there anything I can do for you? Just let me know.
Right.
And the fact is, I desperately need someone to come and clean this up, but I don't know if that's what you're offering. And I don't want to burden you with my mess, with the things I actually need. So no, I'm good. It's fine. My friend ends up not being able to offer the help they genuinely want to give. I still have the dirty laundry. So sometimes things like little bite size, like I would love to send a meal or drop one by. Would that be helpful? Yes or no? I would love to come clean your house. Would this day work or that day? And they can either pick a day or say no. But it's those little things where they don't have to figure out how I need to be helped.
Right.
When they're in the depths of grief type of thing.
Right. But like offering practical things.
Practical things and like bite-sized small questions, even like listening, like, hey, if someone's talking to you, be like, would you like me to just listen or try to help problem solve? Which can sound a little forced when you're doing, but it helps so much because it gives that person permission to say what they need. And it sets you up to be able to support them the way that you're really wanting to support them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
So.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It also kind of reminds me of like with teenagers or really just any kind of friend or family member, do you want to vent or do you want me to help you come up with a solution? I do that with my teenagers a lot. Like, is this a vent session or is this like, do you need me to call the principal or are you just going to vent?
And it's hard. You have to be really intentional to do that. I still struggle to do that sometimes, especially in parenting.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I'm like, you just needed to listen. You didn't have to try to fix it.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Actually, that's really good because I think when, every day, lots of times we encounter people who are struggling with some sort of something. I mean, everybody's struggling. So, do you want me to listen or can I help you with that thing?
And even just as valuable when you get it wrong, going back to say, hey, I realized I just needed to listen and I'm really sorry. That was something I even saw in healthcare of things not going right, of conversations with patients' families going terribly. But the value of that person coming back and saying, hey, I recognize I got that wrong. How could I have done that better? Or just even saying I got it wrong without requiring that person to tell you to fix it. Yeah. Those little things probably matter just as much because to not can often lend to that isolation as well. Of feeling like I just shared this thing and it ended up costing me something, so I'm going to keep it to myself anymore. But just leaning into those spaces to listen and to try to see people's grief in the way that they grieve. A lot of times if someone isn't grieving the way that I would grieve, it must not be grief.
Right.
It's like some people, they get despondent. Some people laugh when they're grieving because they can't handle the weight of it. Some people, I'm fine, I'm good. I'm just going to keep going and nobody's going to see that I'm struggling, but inside they're dying. Or people that are just in despair and finding ways to see grief is going to take different forms for different people, but it still matters. And then leaning into those spaces.
Yeah, I tell people often in therapy, like there's no formula for grief. There's no script. I mean, everybody wants a script, like how long is this going to take? When is this going to end? What's going to be next? And it's like, really, like you're saying, lean into just the process. It's just going to look different for
everyone. And it's
not
the stages of grief. You don't check them off. They're not boxes. They're sneaky and will come back when you least expect them. They're like whack-a-moles type of thing.
Yeah.
That's really all of life type of stuff.
True.
Well, you can even go through a hard thing and heal and mend and turn it around.
Yeah.
And there'll be another part of your life where that's just not happening and you're struggling and you can have both. Yeah. I think there's this notion of you have to get out of one to gain the other. And I've been that way, like very clean cut, make everything nice and shiny, say, oh, here's the good that came out of it type of stuff, or it's got to all be okay, so I'm not here. But I was recently reading in just thinking of that passage in Ecclesiastes where Solomon's like, there's a season for everything. This is paraphrasing. Time to weep, a time for joy, a time for mourning, a time for dancing, time to plant, a time to grow. And some translations, they have an and between that. And it made me realize that I think Annie F. Downs talks about this a lot too, it's both and.
Yeah.
You don't have to just grieve and have to get through that to have the joy. You can have deep grief in one area of your life and still experience joy, whether it's in that same thing or something else. You can be broken and built up at the same time. I think when we give ourselves permission, at least it's helped me.
Yeah.
Permission that I can have both, and that's not a verdict on either. It's just reality. It almost validates that both matter.
Yeah.
It brings strength. And being able to see that for other people and not judging, especially in certain communities or faith practices of thinking, if you're struggling here, then here's a verdict on where you're at in your life and your beliefs and maturity or whatever. And if you're here, then these things must be true. And might not be struggling with other things, but it's both and supporting people in both those things is important. evaluating them too. Yeah.
Holding two things at the same time.
Yeah.
Therapy teaches that.
It does. It does. Therapy's so good. It just should be a requirement to be human.
Maybe.
Yeah,
you're born, I've said this forever. Like, I think when kids get taken, when they're taken to the pediatrician at a young age, they should also be given a mental health therapist at the same time. Like, why we do all this evaluation about the physical body, and then there's this whole other part of us.
I mean, I completely agree.
And they should get a pediatrician and a mental health therapist, and then just have those two as they grow up.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that we're working on at work. Like, how can we, even for the physicians, when there's those disparities of access to care, like, how can we at least equip them to recognize, this is part of it. Like you said, you got to have mental and emotional health to be able to take care of the other things. Yeah. And that affects the whole family too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, another question I was pondering. Yes. How do you, as a mom, a parent who's lost a little one, how do you talk about that one to your living children?
To my kiddos.
Yeah, like what would you say to somebody who's navigating that?
That's a good question. And at least what I have done for me, I have a picture of Isaac in my bedroom. I don't have them all over the house. Actually, I don't have a lot of pictures around my house. Decorating stresses me out. But I have a picture of him, and I will talk to them about it and appropriate. Even when they were little, like, oh, you have a big brother. He's in heaven. Like, just kind of weaving it in. Like, on his birthday this year, we just go and get donuts. So don't belabor the point, because my kids are old enough to the age where one of my children, it makes them very, very sad that they didn't get to meet them, or just awareness that bodies break, things don't always happen the way you want them to. But I talk about it probably a little bit more when they were younger, because it was just more, here's a question, oh, this is your brother. Well, why does he look that way? I'm like, well, that's just kind of how God made him. Like, where's his ear? Oh, that's his brave ear, that he just a little extra special. Like, trying to answer questions, and in a way that hopefully, as we would go about our just life, if we would see families or kids that had the equipment whose bodies did look different than theirs, or you could tell cognitively there were just some differences, to hopefully help them see, like, this is a person, and they're actually way stronger than all of us, because they have to live with this every day, and they keep doing it. To try to weave that in about Isaac. Like, I remember when they were younger, even sometimes now, if we'll see someone just out and about where it's very clear that their bodies are just not made the way most people's are. If they're staring, I don't say, like, don't stare or don't look, because people are always aware of that. But it was like, say hi. Like, you can see them. Or like, why is like that? Oh, that's kind of like Isaac, and try to connect. Okay, this isn't something that happens to other people. This is actually something from our family. And hope that matters, to try to connect those things. So we'll have donuts on his birthday. And if there's a picture of him that they come across, we'll talk about it a little bit. But yeah, try to make it part of our life without it being the main narrative of it, and letting them drive that conversation now that they're a bit older.
Right.
So,
right. That's lovely. I mean, because so many families go through it,
Oh, it's
it's not abnormal to,
I remember thinking, when you're younger, you have all these things that will never happen to you. And they've just become my whole life story. So now I'm saying I'm never going to Hawaii, because then I'm confident it'll happen. But it's the things that happen to other people. But like, once you've had a really sick child, or once you've had a child die, you never forget that it can happen, which can be hard as well when things happen. My own kids, or see things, my mind goes to, you are going to die, or it can escalate this fast, which again, therapy helps with that so much, with diffusing that. But like with HLHS, I'd never heard of it before. But since then, I hear about it all the time. There was a friend in my high school class who had a child like that. And I went to a very small school.
Right.
But once your eyes are open, you see it everywhere. And I think that's an invitation for all of us, whether we've lived it or we want to walk with someone through it, is having eyes of empathy to be able to honestly, to look for the unseen strengths in people and to speak the good you see. When you see a mom who's dealing, like single parent, just dealing with littles, or there's someone with a child screaming their head off in a store, instead of assuming that's a terrible kid, that's a terrible mom, you know what? That child might be having cognitive issues that they can't control. That mom might be already super embarrassed, just like saying, hey, mom, you're doing a great job, mom. Or talking to someone and just giving them eye contact and a smile instead of side eye or turning away. You know, little things, but looking for it, because you'll end up seeing it more.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll end up being changed by it in the process.
And responding to it with more empathy and compassion.
And hopefully more humility too. Yeah. Like there's honestly no real reason on God's green earth why I don't have some of the challenges that other people are born with. Even with Isaac, we did all this testing. Genetically, we couldn't figure out why. It just happened, which has its dynamic of hard to wrestle through. But it can also produce a gratitude of, okay, this could have been my story physically, and it's not. So maybe there's a responsibility to then do for others who just that wasn't an opportunity. And hold space for them.
What do you think's the biggest thing that you learned through this whole experience and journey of, you know, having Isaac and losing Isaac and now coming into this place of career?
Yeah, I think it's a little multifaceted. It's hard to boil it down to the one thing.
Okay, I should have said the 10 things. The 10 things you've learned.
What is the one thing you've learned in your entire life? Well,
that was not a very good question. Yeah.
I think for me is it all kind of they're kind of all multiple sides of the same thing. That you can do all the right things and make all the right choices, and hard stuff still happens, which was not the mindset I grew up with. But the hard things can and will happen, even if you do it all right, and it's not a verdict on you or on the person or your value. It is just the reality, and everyone has their version of that. That beautiful things can come from the most broken places. I've heard it said, like, there's a song I love. It talks about it's talking about the healing work of God, and like you turn graves into gardens, which I think is true. I also think God plants gardens in grave sites. I don't think you have to get rid of the grave to have the garden. I think with Isaac, it's shown me that there can be beautiful gardens at a grave site, that both can be true. And then it can be something that produces flourishing in others, even if like the cost of it never quite goes away. So I think like that altogether, that life, things do happen and there's nothing we can do to fully insulate ourselves from it. That the hard things can produce flourishing without having to make the hard things less hard. And that empathy is a really powerful thing. I think that's really what I learned most from Isaac, that the things that are the stuff you would never ask for can actually be woven together into something you would never want to trade. You'd love to get rid of the pain of it. I'm not going to lie. I would love to some things not have happened, but they don't have to be a verdict on your story. It can just be a season and a part of it. But it takes community to get there. You can't do it alone.
And you must have had really strong community. I mean, I've heard you mentioned community a couple times.
I did. I'm very grateful. You and Bradley were part of that. The Baggetts, the Honeycutts, our church community that walked with us during his life and family, and the community that's walked with my family in recent years. And it's not, I know I've heard some things where people talk about really good friends and community, and sometimes that can be hard because your living circumstance doesn't naturally lend itself to that. But having people, even if it's just one person in a season, that can walk with you and be like, hey, you're gone dark, come here, pull you out. And a space. And sometimes people, it starts just in therapy, just having a place where you can speak, this is what I'm living in right now. And like learn that I can actually be vulnerable and share, and it won't cost me further type of things. But having community, I know for us, when we were in the ICU, you couldn't have community.
Right.
Super sick little boy. And there's tons of like immunosuppressed kids all around. Isaac wasn't the sickest kid in the PICU. I mean, it's what these doctors and nurses do there are just amazing. But even now with like technology, finding communities, even online, like Googling, hey, here's what I'm going through. Is anybody else looking for community there or connecting? There was a mom who I met through my blog in England that she and I still talk today.
Oh.
But she had a son who died of HLHS and had shared a story with me, kind of a metaphor for what having a child with special needs is like that I still use today. But
Is that the Holland story?
that's the Holland story.
I remember you sharing that years ago.
I love it so much. It's just that story of you know you're going to have a baby. It's like getting ready for Italy. You've always wanted to go to Italy. You plan, you learn the language, you get all the little travel guide books, and you take off, and you land, and the flight attendants, oh, welcome to Holland. It's like, excuse me?
Right.
No, I'm supposed to be in Italy. Well, welcome to Holland. This is where you're going to stay. And it's not flashy. It's doesn't have the mozzarella and the great red wine and all of the beautiful things that are Italy. And you have to grieve that loss. You see people coming and going from Italy for the rest of your life. And you just think, yeah, that was my plan. I was supposed to go there. But then when you're able to sit back, you can look around and realize, well, but Holland has Rembrandts. Holland has windmills. Holland has tulips. And Holland will never be Italy, but there are a lot of beautiful things in Holland that are blessings you wouldn't have had if you weren't there. So that's a story that still helps me, even with things people in my family are going through. Like this isn't where you want it to be, but all is not lost. There's good in this land too, even if it's different.
Right. This wasn't the destination you planned for, but it's maybe, where God puts you on, the path God puts you on, and what are you going to make of it?
Yeah, because you're never going to not be around people who are living in the path you wanted.
Yeah.
And that can be hard.
Yeah.
But like that both and being able to grieve where you thought you were going to be and also have eyes to see where you actually are at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, one final question for you. I'm like, which one should I ask? I have a couple here, but I'm just going to ask one more. What do you think you would say to your younger self?
I would tell her that there is no guarantee to a pain-free life. Like I said, you can do all the right things, make all the right choices, and hard is still going to come. And you're going to make it through it. You're going to be okay. That that living in the never be my story moments can actually end up being a life you would never want to live without. It's a process and a journey. But just because your life may not turn out the way you planned it to and have it look like, doesn't mean it's not good. It can still be good and useful to others. So hopefully, if I had known that when I was little, it would have saved me a lot of anger and frustration. But just the reality of life, but that it can also be good.
Well, and I think it's beautiful that you can freely share your story. Yeah. And I thank you so much for sharing it on our podcast here. And I hope that someone listening, can hear these nuggets of advice that you shared already and recognize that this is the life they have and they can choose to make the most of it. Yeah. And that's a powerful choice if they do it.
You just can't do it alone.
Can't do it alone.
You got to be honest with yourself and with others and let them lean in with it.
Yeah.
But it can happen. So
thanks so much for sharing.
You're welcome, Sarah.
It's good to see you.
And always good to see you.
I also like your hair blonde.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'm going so gray that the red was phasing. I'm like, okay, I've got to embrace this now.
Embrace it.
But thank you so much.
Well, thanks again. And thanks for listening.